for the income tax regulations of 2019 and all, how all of that tie into making our nation and our economy a lot better, and you better, hopefully. We have Matthew Gbonjubola, who's a Director of Tax Policy at the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Also here is Taiwo Oyedele, who's a Fiscal Policy Partner at the PwC. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's start with you, Mr. Gbonjubola. What does it mean to be... Okay, just explain this entire policy. Why it's browsing so much dust when it was first announced?
Thank you very much. I think let's start from the beginning. Before now, Nigeria's name was put on the list of non-compliant, non-cooperating list of the FATF. It's called a blacklist. And that was way back in 2009, 2010. And the government struggled to get the name of Nigeria off that list. And what that means is that Nigeria was perceived as harboring illicit flow, persons engaged in an illicit flow of fund. There was no transparency, and therefore people could raise money to fund terrorism and all the likes.
You're talking about things like money laundering and...
all of those ones.
Those sorts of things.
Yeah, so it took a lot of work for the government to get the name of Nigeria off that list. And what somebody can say, what does that mean? It means that, for example, our institution couldn't borrow money freely in the international financial market. And all of that, we had problem moving money, legitimate money from businesses in Nigeria to suppliers overseas and all of that. And as a fallout after the resolution of that issue, Nigeria had to join what we call the Global Forum for Transparency in Tax Matters, which means Nigeria must exchange tax information with treaty partners. And then the system was upscaled to what is called automatic exchange of tax information or financial accounts information. And in 2017, Nigeria signed the Multilateral Competent Authority Agreement to be part of that global move to exchange information automatically with other countries. And in 2019, the Income Tax Common Reporting Standard Regulations to provide the legal framework for that transmission was enacted, which would mean that financial institutions with respect to reportable accounts will provide relevant financial account information through the Federal Revenue Service and then exchange with our treaty partners outside the country. That was the beginning. And now...
I do beg your pardon. You spoke earlier about us having difficulty borrowing money and us being able to send monies out for our imports and stuff. But you could have fooled us because it seemed to us like money was going out freely and everything was coming into the country, including toothpicks.
Okay, just before you answer that question, we'll just take a quick one and we'll come back and you take up on that answer and then we'll bring you in, Mr. Oyedele. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We're looking at the matter of the self-certification exercise announced by the federal government and clarified by the FIRSC. Now, Mr. Gbonjubola, Alera asked a question as regard when you say transferring of money, but a lot of monies go out of the country. How's that relatable?
Yeah, thank you very much. When we say a lot of money go out of the country, through what means? There are official channels, business channels for moving money through the banks, through the relevant international correspondent banking. That is the normal channel for moving money. But if the system is perceived not to be clean, not to be transparent, then people wanting to do genuine businesses, wanting to transfer legitimate money, run into trouble. We are not talking of when people put money into their pockets or into their portfolios and find a way to get them across in airplanes or ships or cruise ships. No, we're not talking about that one. We're talking about people sitting down, doing their business, going to their banks, moving money legitimately for legitimate business. They run into trouble.
Okay, Mr. Oyedele, this matter of money movement, reporting accounts, he used the phrase again, and I wanted to get back to it, but I want you to weigh in on this. How did you take it, for one who's looking at fiscal policy and comparing it to monetary policy, and how all of this affects the economy and the citizens resident in that country?
Yeah, so I like that question, actually. How does it affect the citizens? So to build on what Mr. Gbonjubola has said, so if you just go back a little bit in time, and I want to tie this to taxation and what that means for our national development and all of that. So Nigerians are not tax compliant, largely, and this is based on data, especially the richest people in Nigeria. So I'll call them the top 1%. So in many countries around the world, there are different rules for paying taxes. So in the US, for example, and Eritrea, there are the two countries in the world where if you're a citizen or a permanent resident, if you leave the US and go to the moon and be there for 10 years, your obligation to file tax returns and pay taxes continue. So in many countries like Nigeria, you can break your tax tie. So if I leave Nigeria today and I go to Ghana or South Africa and I stay there for more than half a year, that's 183 days, I no longer have to pay taxes in Nigeria. But if I'm here in Nigeria, I have to pay taxes on my income earned in Nigeria and anywhere else around the world. So the reason why I'm providing that background is because the US started this whole thing we're talking about by reason of their FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which they enacted in 2010. They realized that there were Americans around the world who were not reporting the income they were earning to pay taxes in the US. So they enacted a law asking the whole world to help them enforce their laws by reporting Americans, wherever they may be, reporting their assets and resources to American governments. Nigerian banks had to comply because if you didn't comply, of course, only the US can do that. Any inflow belonging to you that passes through the US banking system, you suffer 30% of it. So, for example, what Nigerian banks had to do was if you were opening a bank account, they ask you for your nationality, you just put Nigerian there, you move on. You haven't lied. It's just so possible that you may not have told us that you have dual citizenship and you're also an American citizen. So America said you must redo those processes and ask people specifically, are you a national of the US or a permanent resident? If your answer was yes, from now on, all your financial information must be sent to the US so US can tax you. So in Nigeria, we do not have the same framework. We have a lot of people making money in Nigeria who are not disclosing the information, not paying taxes. In South Africa, the top 1% in South Africa pays more personal income tax, and listen to this, that is more than the combined amount that all the states in Nigeria collected and the FRS. That top 1% in South Africa is only about 50,000 people. In South Africa, if you earn up to 2 million naira per annum, you pay zero tax. They've exempted all their poor people, right? All the people in the tax stand for personal income tax is under 5 million, and they make more money than all the revenue we made in Nigeria. So in Nigeria, all the taxes we collect from individuals is not even up to 2 trillion naira. So the question is, the reason why that is possible is that there are people who are making a lot of money and they're hiding it. So what Nigeria has done is, this framework was created by the OECD, copying the US FATCA, to say let the whole world do it. As of today, not today, about 2 weeks ago, we have 109 territories around the world that have signed up. So what it means is, including Nigeria. It means, of course, the obligation is we are going to send you information about Nigerians wherever they may be. But you, Nigeria, must also commit that anybody who is in your territory that has obligation with other countries, you collect the data and send to us. You can't just benefit alone. And I think that Nigerians should be happy about this, because what it means is the people who are being targeted, in my view, are less than 1% of the population. But the question is, how do you find out who is exposed? You know, which I think maybe government could have managed that well. Instead of asking everybody to go there.
But, you know, maybe that's why that initial announcement came, that everybody go and get recertified. Then when you fill out the form, you can now sift.
Yes.
You know, maybe that would have helped. Or don't you?
That actually was the intention. Just like Mr. Oyedele said, the intention was to say who had these reportable account holders. You can't just know by looking at people's faces. Then you need to get people to give you specific information as to the country wherein they are taxable, or where if they have double tax residence, then you need to get that information. The current account opening profile in all our financial institutions were not designed to capture this kind of information as at the time that accounts were opened. For new accounts, going forward, we won't have this issue. But for existing accounts, where people had provided information before, which does not include the information as to the country wherein they are taxable, then the financial institution needed to get back to those account holders and ask the question specifically, just like the U.S. in the time of FATCA requested for that information to be provided, with a view to identifying that maybe 1% or less than 1% of the population in the financial institutions that will fall into reportable accounts.
But Mr. Oyedele, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm reading into this. If you are a Nigerian and you have assets in the U.S., for instance, and you have income, you're going to pay tax to the United States government on those assets you have over there. Now, with this system, you will pay tax over there, then you will pay tax again in your country.
No, you wouldn't. Okay, so let's say the starting point is we just need information. So government need information. And if, for example, I'll use you as an example. So you live and work in Nigeria. You have an account in the UK, you have a house in Dubai, another one in the US.
Amen to that.
So you could be earning dividend, interest, royalty. You could earn anything, but we just want to have the information. Is it with investment bankers, asset managers, banks? When we now get that information, we then run through our tax laws. What does it say? I'll tell you what the tax law says in Nigeria. It says if you are a resident here in Nigeria, you should pay tax on your income sourced from within Nigeria and outside Nigeria, anywhere in the world. But there's a long list of things you earn abroad that when you report it, you're exempted. Dividend, interest, royalty, you don't pay any tax if you have paid, because the expectation is you must have paid tax abroad. But let's imagine a scenario when we receive that information about your financial resources from abroad. It shows that at the beginning of last year, you had $1 million, for example. At the end of last year, it became $3 million. So that's an increase of $2 million. We want to find out in your tax returns in Nigeria, how did you report the increase? Because money just don't appear from heaven. So this increase could have been that somebody paid you. What were they paying you for? It could have been that you borrowed. Nobody asks you to pay tax on borrowing. But if you now have things that should have been taxed in Nigeria, you fail to declare it, we tax you, we apply penalties. If it's a source you cannot explain, it might be that this is even more than tax matters, right? So to be honest, the framework, I'm excited about it personally. And I think we should all embrace it and say, how can we make it work? Of course, I think Nigerians are justifiably angry when you ask all of them to go and do it. And the analogy I gave was, it's like trying to find out how many Nigerians have schooled abroad. And you now ask everybody to go and send information so we can establish that. There's a way you can design the process. Say, for example, if you have no international passport, chances are that you haven't been to a school abroad. You know, if you were too young and you're a teenager, you're unlikely to go to a university. So by the time you narrow down the population you are targeting, right, it may not be perfect. You may find it's only 1% of Nigerians, you know, who need to go through that process.
Okay, Mr. Gbonjubola, what exactly is the instruction now? We have read that it came out, then it was withdrawn and rephrased and rephrased. So what is the position now? Who are those supposed to go to the banks to go and re-register, so to speak?
Thank you very much. And I think if I take it from where Mr. Oyedele stopped, in where we have data, reliable data, in that could be used to stratify a population into different strata, it becomes a lot workable and a lot easier. Where there is a lot of trust, because again, there are a lot of trust business here, it's again easy to narrow down and scope in into specific category of people. But we have we have an environment where data is not very reliable. We have environment where trust is a little bit on the low side of it. And that's what makes it a little bit difficult to do the zeroing in, the focusing in as suggested by Taiwo. Howbeit, the intention, the target, is to get that people who are either one, exclusively taxable in countries other than Nigeria, or who, though taxable in Nigeria, are still taxable in other territories. And those are the people we say have dual residency or dual tax presence. Those are the primary and only targets. But the question is, how would the financial institutions have this information without asking that question from everybody? I think that is actually the challenge that is there. And that was what informed the information put out in the public notice by the Federal Revenue Service to say that account holders would need to provide this information to say, oh, I am only taxable in Nigeria. And that is why it is called self-certification. We are not going to do the certification before a court or before a judge or need to do it. Just say on my own.
But then
just provide that information. That is actually the issue.
The argument out there said we all have BVNs.
That's correct.
So when you were registering for the BVN, some of these questions were not asked?
I had a BVN myself, and I recall going through the process, and the questions that were posed, if I recall the form, were, who is my person, my name, my date of birth, and all of that, where do I live, and those were the questions asked. Nobody asked me, are you taxable in Ghana, or are you taxable in Nigeria or elsewhere? Because as at the time the BVN a protocol was developed, there was no intention for taxation, even though many people thought it was for tax purposes. No, the CBN came up with that very brilliant idea to be able to link a face to an account. That was just the only purpose of the BVN protocol. But what we are talking about now is to say, where you as an individual or as a company, where are you taxable? Are you taxable in Nigeria? If you are taxable in Nigeria, then we don't have any problem with you. We already know where you are taxable. Oh, if you are taxable outside Nigeria, just tell us the country where you are taxable, so that when we have the information, we can send to the right country. Again, we don't want to give the information that belongs to Ghana, we don't want to give to Sierra Leone. And this is where providing this specific information becomes important, because financial account information is confidential, it is personal, and therefore must be so treated. And this is why this process is important, that we get accurate information so that we don't misdirect somebody's information to persons who should not have access to them.
Okay. This matter of taxability, Dakpo Oduwole says if you want Nigerians to pay tax, you need to convince them that the proceeds from the tax will be utilized judiciously and not be embezzled in any guise. So, I know when Mr. Oyedele started, he talked about Nigerians are not paying taxes. I mean, many Nigerians are. There are very few that are paying taxes, whether income or whichever way you want to look at it. But you're saying this matter is also to help increase or tighten up or work on the tax net. How are the people going to buy into it if there is no education? You asked the question, am I taxable in Ghana? Am I taxable in the USA? Do I even understand exactly what it means to be taxable? What's the requirement?
Thank you very much. I think two things here. One, most people are very interested on issues of their health. And so they will do all possible to get accurate information about the status of their health and, if need be, seek treatment. Similarly, I want to encourage every Nigerian to be interested in taxation. Because in the world of today, taxation is no longer an optional subject. It's a core discussion. And so people must get interested. That is one. Number two, about education, part of the information that was probably misunderstood was as an effort of government to educate, to make people to understand what is happening and what individuals need to do. And now, lastly, let me come to the issue of how do I know where I'm taxable? You are taxable, for example, under the Nigerian law, if you reside in Nigeria ordinarily. So which means Nigeria is where you live. Ordinarily, you could travel to US, you could travel to Russia, but your home, where you ordinarily reside, do your business, is Nigeria. You are taxable in Nigeria. All the income you make, just like Taiwo said, all over the world is taxable under our law in Nigeria. But if you are a casual visitor to Nigeria, you come to spend holiday. Obudu Ranch is one of the most beautiful places on the planet Earth. You want to come there, spend 1 month, 2 months, and then you go back to your home country. You are not taxable in Nigeria. Even if you earn income in Nigeria, we will now begin to look at the law. Is this income, are we able to tax it? If the law says yes, then only that portion that you have earned in Nigeria will be liable to tax in Nigeria. Okay. But even the law can now say, no, this guy only came here casually. He could have made some money along the line. We have an agreement with his country. This money is not taxable in Nigeria. Then you still go and do your tax in your country. So, those are the basic principles. And so the basic is where ordinarily do I reside? Okay. If you can answer that basic question, which I believe every Nigerian can answer, then you can then know where you are taxable.
Let me just, does that then mean that if we have the identity management scheme working effectively, would that take care of this matter?
Partly it will help. Partly in the sense that it may still not tell us where you are 100% taxable, but at least, I mean, just like Taiwo said in earlier, we can now begin to now use the data. We cannot stratify the data, and then we can then say, okay, this is not likely to fall into this category. And of course, we can now use the rule of probability to shift the data.
Mr. Oyedele, we need to discuss Gbonjubola's tweet talking about the proceeds from tax and how it is being utilized and not being embezzled, and tied with what he has said about the people need a buy-in. Most of Nigeria's business is in the informal sector. So there's no taxation at source or from source. They will report how much they have made for the purposes of taxation because they believe that this money is going to be used for their benefit. As long as they see that the money is being embezzled, they're not likely to buy into this and report correct information, or maybe not even report at all. They will not want to pay any taxes. Look at when Babatunde Fashola was, well, I will ask this question after we come back from this break. I'm overrunning. We'll take a short break and return to continue the conversation.
Welcome back. Shola Sage says the problem is a lack of trust between the people and government. Historically speaking, such funds have been diverted into the pockets of the so-called 1%. As the head of tax bodies are being politicized, Nigeria was Well, then anybody says, we need to also hear from Nigerians in diaspora to explain how their tax payment is there and the role of the self-certification. I think Festus one time sent us some things about taxing and some of the exemptions that we're getting in the diaspora. Your question, Alera?
Yes, I was talking about the buy-in of the people, especially since a large part of our economy is in the informal sector. And I was going to cite the example of when Babatunde Fashola was governor, and Okada riders were actually asking for where tax offices were so they could go and pay their taxes because they saw what their money was doing in the state.
Yeah, very, very important question, actually. So maybe to quickly address the issue of, because I also, when you read that tweet, I then remember that one of the things that are trending is people are saying, why are you asking Nigerians living abroad to pay tax in Nigeria? This will not make them pay tax in Nigeria. But it is possible that if you live in the U.S. as a Nigerian, and you've declared your income to the U.S. authorities and you've paid tax, this process of collecting financial information could result in an amount that they saw came into your account in the U.S. from Nigeria. For example, you have a property in Ikoyi, you rent it out, you're collecting $50,000 per annum, and you haven't reported it to the U.S. authorities. And whether you even reported it or not, that is liable to tax in Nigeria. We want to know and also ask you to pay tax.
And in the U.S.
So the U.S. have their own rules, yes. Usually what countries normally do is to give you an exemption if you've paid tax at the source.
Okay.
And that's left to every country to decide. Nigeria has our own rule. We give enough credit and reliefs. Right. So to your question, yeah. So I think trust deficit is a huge problem. And to be honest, I do not blame Nigerians because trust is earned. You cannot command it into being. You can't sign a law to say you must trust government. So if we read all of these things we read in the newspapers, issues with NDDC, with NMPC, and the list goes on, it kills trust. So that I understand. But the way to solve the problem is not to then give up on Nigeria and say, we're not going to do anything. Every sentence you say today, if you are speaking on behalf of government, is misinterpreted immediately before people even seek to understand. So when this issue came up a couple of days ago, because this is something I've been involved with for more than 10 years, from the days of FATCA, I knew that the information that the federal government put out was misleading. So I tried to explain it. People didn't read what I put out there. They were just complaining. You could have just read to understand first. And once you understand the issues and the policy direction, Nigeria should be the one to drive it. To be honest, I think that our strategy around taxation of informal sector is completely wrong. You are going after people who are struggling to survive on a day-to-day basis in a country where there's no social safety nets, no social security. I just gave you the example of South Africa. 2 million naira, you pay no tax at all. Yet, they collect more taxes from personal income tax alone, worth more than 11 trillion naira equivalent. So what we then need to do is government has to start by building that trust in the way they report the taxes they collect and other revenue, and more importantly, how it is utilized. When you see a case of corruption, deal with it decisively. Beyond that, create a systemic way of preventing it. Because if you're finding the money after it's been stolen, it's a waste of everybody's time. And on the part of the citizens and taxpayers, people must be interested in education. You cannot give up. Try and understand your rights. Try and know what happens elsewhere. Use your platforms. You could be Market Women Association or Okada Riders and propose reforms. NLC can propose reforms that will protect the vulnerable people in Nigeria, but at the same time get the people who have the means to pay the right amount, and then compel governments to use the money to do the right thing. That is the only way we can have a country we can be proud of. Any other way is not sustainable.
Okay. Mr. Gbonjubola, he said something here. And the question of trust. A couple of tweets are here, so let me just run through them. Victor says, we pay tax. Agberos tax us daily. Who did they remit the money to?
Where does it go?
Again, that question of trust, anybody says the government of Nigeria makes it seem like they're doing the citizens a favor in terms of development and growth to make it seem like people are not paying taxes. Political leaders commission projects like it's a privilege, they are doing it for the citizens in Soria James. The problem of Nigerians is not how to pay tax, but the government officials and politicians' lifestyles with the tax and oil revenues. Olu Akeju says, tax is good for development, but how do you balance the problem of trust? Again, our trust issue. Festus says, truth is, we will never have the infrastructure we desperately need if Nigerians are not seeing taxes as an important fact of our national life.
Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
The reason why our national debt is growing is because many Nigerians are not paying taxes. Festus will explain to us how he pays his tax in the UK. He lives in the UK.
Nigerians are not paying taxes because they don't know what government does with the taxes.
So how is it?
So they see no need to pay the tax. There's no good road. There's no hospital for them to go to. There's no, the schools are dilapidated. So what exactly do you want to use this money to do?
So it's a question of reorientation, or so to speak. If SA can earn more personal income tax from less than 1%, and Nigeria's population is about almost four times that of South Africa, why are we here? Maybe the FIRS is not talking to Nigerians enough.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good question to ask, why are we here? Number one, I think FIRS is talking, and probably, I hope, not talking too much, because it's not in the tradition of tax authorities to talk, because the business of tax is not a business of pages on newspaper because of confidentiality and all of that.
Maybe it's got to the point where that should actually be part of your business.
However, to come to your question,
maybe the business should not be about the business of taxing, but the business of tax education.
Good. Now, how did we get here? It's a big question. A big question because it's a mix of tradition, mix of political, a mix of economical. So it's not just we didn't get here by hap chance. It's by a combination of one step after the other that got us here. Without pointing fingers, we know when it comes to obedience to public rules, including taxation, some sections appear to outdo other sections in this country, and we all know that. It's also common that former businesses, people engaged in professions, are much more compliant than those who are into informal businesses. Another issue is, do we even know ourselves? I mean, I read in somewhere during this week that somebody said projected population of Nigeria is 203 million. And the first question that came to my head is, how did we get that?
Without a census.
So you can be sure in another 6 months, somebody is going to move on to 2010. Another one is going to move on to 250 million. Because it's easy for us to throw numbers. Mm-hmm. But the question is, what are the underlying statistics behind those numbers? So question is, in Lagos, as organized as Lagos State is, how many Okada Riders Associations do we have?
We don't know.
That is the question. Not to talk of how many Okada riders
are there.
Whereas if you go to SA, just like Taiwo said, they will tell you the number of cab drivers. They will tell you the number of courier motorcycle riders, because they have data. And so it becomes a lot easier. I came into this environment for the very first time. And so when I came here, I was discussing with Taiwo. We came in the same vehicle and said, look, this is a big city. I've never been here before. But I will be surprised if somebody can give us an accurate census of the people living in this community, as small as this community is. And so before you cannot begin to break down how many of them are bricklayers, how many of them are carpenters, how many of them are electricians, how many of them are plumbers. When you don't have this information, then how do you bring people to taxation? That is the starting point. Then, coupled, the issue of trust is always there, because a again, I had a colleague who worked in South African Revenue Service, SARS, and we discussed, and during this coronavirus, and they had to provide palliatives. They actually practically know everyone who lives in every room. And so it becomes easy for them to target their palliatives. They know who needs and who does not need. In Nigeria, do we have that kind of data? And that is why what is meant for the lowly people actually end up within either the middle or the upper people, because we actually don't know people we should target. So this is why we are getting where we are. So it's a whole gamut of issue. But just like Taiwo said, beheading is not the cure for headache. We need to ask ourselves, our generation, the generation coming behind us, what will they come to meet? And that is where it's important. We need to understand what's our civic duties with taxes and pay, and also insist that the peoples we have appointed to superintend over these resources use them for the purposes for which they are intended. If we can do those two, I strongly and firmly believe that we will reverse this trend. And then the kind of infrastructure we are talking about that they are not there today, then those resources will be available to do them. But we must do them. We cannot abandon Nigeria.
Mr. Gbonjubola, does it happen that the inland revenue pays people visits? And what I mean is, for instance, somebody wins the lottery in the US, and in no time at all, the tax authorities are there to just inform him of his tax obligations based on his winnings. Does it happen in Nigeria at all that you all go to visit people who seem to be living opulent lives and you want to inform them of their tax obligations without threats?
Let me read this. It will help you. It says, Lateef Oyewale Salam says, we have individuals not known with any source of income, but being in public service or in government, display obscene opulence in an increasing tough environment like Nigeria.
Yeah.
Well, they're paying their taxes at source. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think they are linked together. Number one, probably in the past, it was not happening. But I can tell you, in the Federal Revenue Service of today, you incorporate a company today, we have a welcome package for you without you even coming to us.
Welcome package?
Yes, and I mean welcome packages. Oh, we welcome you to the business world. And we'll let you know what are your tax obligations, how we can assist you to comply, and all of that.
Are you sure?
At the federal level, yes. However, don't forget that in Nigeria we have 38 tax authorities recognized by our constitution.
Yep.
We have the federal government, Federal Revenue Service, which services the federation. We have the state internal revenue services and FCT, 36 of state, 1 of FCT, 37. And there are specific line of demarcation where Federal Revenue Service could not cross to the territory of those states. So it's therefore possible for somebody who has won the lottery, probably is a resident in my state of Osun, where I come from. The Federal Revenue Service has no jurisdiction over that individual. Okay. It is the tax authority in that state who should do that kind of celebration with an assessment to say, look, we rejoice with you. Please, we want our own share of it. But if they don't do that, if the Federal Revenue Service attempts to do that, it will be a constitutional crisis. However, I am hoping that with the Joint Tax Board, some of these things are spreading. And part of the initiative for that is the tax identification number, which is hosted now by the Joint Tax Board. That doesn't matter where you live, you have one unique tax number, Wherever you go within this country, that number follows you just like your BVN. So that is helping along that line. So that's some of the things that we are doing. But beyond that, we need to move to the level of taking control of this country. I mean, the people of Nigeria must take control. And how do we take control? It's when we control the finances by payment of our taxes. Then we can look our local government chairman eyeball to eyeball and say, I pay your salary. I pay for that car you are riding. You can look at your governor and say, yes, I respect you, Mr. Governor, but sorry, that house where you live, that is governor's lodge, I paid for it. And then you can command that person, occupant, and say, this is our will as a community.
Please command respectfully before the security operative. Okay.
Even the security operative is paid by
the
taxes.
taxpayers, yes.
And so it becomes a lot easier. But where we don't have a stake by saying this is my contribution in this, then you don't have much mouth there. And that is what is happening to us as a nation today.
Okay. Mr. Oyedele, Agumbama says the UK employed the CRS regime effortlessly because its robust tax structure. There was no announcement and prompting a stampede to the banks to update personal data. Again, that question of data. Like the US and UK, Nigeria needs to develop synergy with organizations that already have information. As we begin to wind down, what's your advice to Nigerians, to the government, and the citizens in particular?
Yeah. So the reality is that we have lost a lot of time. So we're already behind. We do not have a good information management system, but that doesn't mean that we cannot start now. So even with the pandemic, with COVID-19, so there were many countries where all they needed to do was to look at the tax records. Because, for example, even if you were poor, you still needed to submit your returns and declare your affairs. I can just go to the tax database and query it. Anybody who earned less than a certain amount last year must be poor. You have their bank account, you just credit them directly. So palliative was bread and butter to do. In Nigeria, that's a nightmare to do. So we have to first and foremost think about how do we collect data in a sensible manner. So you asked the question about people living, luxury lives and nobody's asking questions. In fact, waiting for them to display it and go after them is going to capture less than 1% of the target. But when you have data, so people buy vehicles today, they register with the state. You want to build a house, the land is with the state. You're traveling abroad, who gives you the passport? The state. You're paying school fees, dollars and pounds abroad. Where did you get it from? From the CBN and the banks. But nobody is connecting the dots to piece this information together in a systemic manner.
And the black market.
And the black market. So data management is key. Number two advice I'll have is for government at all levels. And most time we even forget that the levels are 3, not just 1. Right? The focus on state and local government also needs to be at the same level as the federal government. We must start asking questions. To force our leaders to do the social contract, let me put it that way, has to be restored. For them to know that this is an agreement between us and them, and they have to live and work for the purposes of Nigerians. And lastly, is for Nigerians themselves to not give up, to continue to show interest. So what you're doing this program, for example, is good education, but I'm sure that people who are watching now are less than those who are watching BB Niger, right? They have their right to watch entertainment, but you also have to be equally interested in things that affect your lives. I once read an article in the UK that says, if you want the attention of the public, talk about tax, talk about entertainment. Here in Nigeria, talk about tax, nobody cares. The only reason why we are talking about this topic now was because federal government handle tweeted it. FRS has been on it for more than 2 years. Nobody cares.
All right, thank you very much. Architect Rich Eze actually asked a question. He says, the cost of running the FRS, is it not too expensive? He says, we have an excess workforce in the FRS whose overall salary surpass the total that could come in even if the net is expanded to the boundaries of Nigeria.
And then Okunadema says government needs to do more. It's difficult for people to pay tax when they have to provide their own water, electricity, security, and roads to do a small business in Nigeria.
And finally,
no unemployment benefit. Where do we go from here?
Finally, that just for that break, Festus says we pay a plethora of taxes in the UK. It's criminal offence and not to pay, and many don't trust the government in the UK as well. But thank you so much, Matthew Gbonjubola, Director of Tax Policy, FIRS, and Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner at the PwC. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing this morning with us.
Thank you for having us.
Sunrise will be back in a moment. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying with us.